Elizabeth Taylor, the violet-eyed icon of Hollywood, remained as enigmatic in death as she was in life. Famous for her extravagant lifestyle and a career spanning decades, Taylor left a final request that left even her closest associates stunned. She insisted on arriving at her own funeral in true style, not metaphorically, but literally, with her casket scheduled to be brought in 15 minutes after the service began. This was no light-hearted quip but a deliberate decision to solidify her legacy as a woman who consistently defied convention. Furthermore, Taylor, who was married 8 times, requested that she be interred with her cherished diamond stud earrings, rumored to be worth more than many homes. Her final resting place at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California is unmarked, a stark contrast to her larger-than-life persona. Some speculate that this was intended to avoid transforming her grave into a tourist attraction, while others believe it was her ultimate act of privacy after a life lived under relentless public scrutiny. Even in death, Elizabeth Taylor orchestrated a final performance, leaving behind a legacy as dazzling and mysterious as the jewels she so adored. Bela Lugosi, the actor who forever immortalized Count Dracula on screen, made a burial request that blurred the boundaries between his life and his most iconic role. When he died in the mid-20th century, his family honored his wish to be interred in his full Dracula costume, complete with the signature black cape. This request wasn't a mere publicity stunt, it was a deeply personal decision. Lugosi had long struggled to separate his identity from the character that had launched him to stardom, and in the end, he chose to embrace it completely. Yet, there's an even stranger twist. Despite his fame, Lugosi died almost penniless, his career having been marred by typecasting and personal hardships. His funeral was a modest affair attended by only a few close friends and family, but his burial in the Dracula attire turned his grave into a macabre pilgrimage site for fans of the horror genre. Bela Lugosi's final wish was not simply an homage to his most famous role, it was a haunting reminder of how the character consumed his life. Even in death, his grave at Holy Cross Cemetery in California stands as a testament to the man who became inseparable from the monster he portrayed. Tallulah Bankhead, the captivating actress renowned for her gravelly voice and defiant spirit, left behind a burial request as nonconformist as her life itself. Tula, celebrated for her off-screen escapades as much as for her on-screen charisma, had a unique wish. She desired to be laid to rest with a bottle of bourbon, a pack of cigarettes, and a copy of her cherished Bible. This assortment of items impeccably encapsulated the paradoxes of her character, a woman who lived life on her own terms yet maintained a touch of spirituality. Her funeral, held in the early 1960s, was a solemn event, but her burial directions added a spark of her trademark irreverence. Moreover, a lesser-known facet of her story is that Tulah's final resting place is in St. Paul's Churchyard in Maryland, far removed from Hollywood's glitz. She selected this spot because it was near her family's roots, a surprising choice for someone who spent much of her life challenging convention. Even in death, Tallulah Bankhead managed to merge humor, defiance, and a hint of sentimentality, leaving behind a legacy as unforgettable as the woman herself. Joan Crawford, the queen of melodrama and one of Hollywood's most controversial figures, left behind a burial request as startling as her on-screen roles. Despite her glamorous public image, her final wishes exposed a troubled personal life. She asked to be cremated and laid to rest in a modest crypt at Ferncliff Cemetery in New York, far removed from the Hollywood limelight. The real shock, however, comes from what she deliberately omitted. Joan specifically excluded her 2 eldest children, Christina and Christopher, from her will, leaving them nothing but a single cutting line, a decision with well-known reasons. This move followed years of public speculation over her fraught relationship with her children, amplified by Christina's later memoir, which depicted Joan as a domineering presence behind closed doors. Adding to the intrigue, her ashes now lie in a crypt alongside her final husband, Alfred Steele, yet her burial spot remains understated and nearly anonymous. For a woman who commanded attention throughout her life, her final resting place is eerily quiet, leaving behind more questions than answers about the true nature of her relationships and personal legacy. Pola Negri, the mysterious star of the silent film era, was renowned for her dramatic flair both on and off the screen. Her life unfolded as a whirlwind of romance, scandal, and constant reinvention, yet it was her final burial wish that cemented her reputation as one of Hollywood's most unconventional figures. Negri, who had been romantically linked with Rudolph Valentino, made a request that astonished even her closest confidants. She asked to be interred with a vial of Valentino's ashes, a claim that ignited controversy and disbelief. The reality behind this request remains murky, as Valentino, who had passed away decades earlier, was never officially cremated and no records exist of his ashes being distributed. Nonetheless, Negri maintained that she possessed a small portion of them, a keepsake from their passionate, albeit brief, romance. Whether this was a fabrication or an authentic relic, it only added to her mystique. Further deepening the intrigue, Negri's burial site in California was designed to reflect her European heritage, complete with ornate carvings and a hint of old-world glamour. Her grave has become a shrine to her theatrical life, yet the mystery of the alleged ashes remains unsolved. Was it a final act of devotion or one last performance from a woman who truly lived for the spotlight? Clark Gable, celebrated as the king of Hollywood and lead in Gone with the Wind, had a burial wish that revealed a very personal side of the man behind the legend. Gable, who died in the early 60s, was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California, but the true story lies in the location of his grave. He chose to be interred next to his third wife. Errol Flynn, the dashing swashbuckler from The Adventures of Robin Hood, had a burial request as extravagant as the roles he played. Flynn, who died in the late 1950s, was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California. However, his final wish was to have one of his most cherished possessions accompany him, a 6-foot-tall statue of a woman. This statue, which once served as the centerpiece of his home, was believed to symbolize his hedonistic lifestyle and passion for beauty. Yet ultimately, the statue was not included in his burial, as it was considered too impractical. Instead, Flynn was commemorated with a simple marker, a striking contrast to the extravagance he was known for in life. Adding to the intrigue, his funeral was attended by only a small group of close friends and family, a modest farewell for a man whose life was anything but ordinary. Although his burial wish was only partially fulfilled, it remains a fascinating glimpse into the character of a man who lived boldly and left behind a legacy as one of Hollywood's most charismatic and controversial figures. Carole Lombard, the great love of his life, passed away in the early 1940s, and Gable bore the burden of her loss for the remainder of his life. Despite remarrying twice after her passing, he made it clear that he longed to spend eternity by her side. Even more moving is that Gable's grave is marked with a simple plaque, reflecting his wish for a modest and private resting place far removed from the opulence of his Hollywood persona. His burial request wasn't merely an expression of love, it was a testament to the profound grief and unwavering devotion he carried for decades. For a man who was larger than life on screen, his final resting place tells a story of quiet vulnerability and a love that transcended time. Jean Harlow, Hollywood's original blonde bombshell, left behind a legacy of glamour, sorrow, and a burial story that still captivates. Harlow died in the late 1930s at just 26, leaving the world reeling from the loss of one of its brightest stars. Her final wish was both simple and deeply symbolic. She wanted to be laid to rest in a white gown, surrounded by white flowers, within a white marble crypt. This request wasn't merely a nod to her iconic platinum blonde image, it reflected her desire to be remembered as pure and untarnished, despite the scandals and heartbreaks that marred her short life. Harlow's final resting place is in the Great Melham at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California, a location often dubbed the Taj Mahal of the West. Interestingly, her crypt was paid for by her lover William Powell, who was so devastated by her passing that he ensured she received a burial fit for a queen. Even in death, Jean Harlow's life remains shrouded in both beauty and mystery, a fitting end for a woman who defined an era of Hollywood glamour. Rudolph Valentino, the quintessential Latin lover and one of Hollywood's earliest sex symbols, left behind a burial tale as dramatic as the films in which he starred. Valentino died suddenly in the mid-1920s at just 31 years old, plunging the entertainment world into mourning. Although his final wishes were never officially recorded, his close friends and family ensured that his grave honored his iconic status. He was laid to rest in a borrowed crypt at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a temporary arrangement that has now endured for nearly a century. The crypt, owned by a friend, has since become a shrine for his devoted fans, many of whom still visit today. One of the most fascinating aspects of Valentino's burial is the legend of the Lady in Black, a mysterious woman who began visiting his grave every year on the anniversary of his death, leaving a single red rose. This tradition has been carried on by others, transforming his resting place into a beacon of enduring devotion and intrigue. Rudolph Valentino's burial was not merely the end of his life, it marked the beginning of a myth that continues to captivate the world. Mary Pickford, celebrated as America's sweetheart and one of early Hollywood's most influential figures, left a final burial wish that reflected her deep bond with family and her enduring legacy. Pickford, who passed away in the late 1970s, was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California, yet her final resting place was anything but ordinary. She opted to be interred in the Garden of Memory, a tranquil and secluded section of the cemetery, alongside her mother and siblings. This decision served as a poignant reminder of the central role family played in her life, despite the tremendous fame and fortune she had achieved. Even more intriguing is that Pickford's crypt is inscribed with the words, "America's Sweetheart," a title she both embraced and resented during her lifetime. Her burial site stands as a quiet, understated tribute to a woman who helped shape the film industry but often struggled with the pressures of her public image. Ultimately, Mary Pickford's final wish wasn't about grandeur or spectacle, it was about finding peace in the company of those she loved most, a stark contrast to the larger-than-life persona she portrayed on screen. Greta Garbo, the enigmatic film icon who famously proclaimed her preference for solitude, carried her desire for seclusion into her final days. Garbo, who died in the early 1990s, left a burial wish that mirrored her lifelong reluctance to embrace the spotlight. She chose to be cremated and interred in her native Sweden, far from the Hollywood glitz that once defined her career. Her ashes now rest in a modest grave at Scotch Kisa Garden Cemetery in Stockholm, a UNESCO World Heritage Site celebrated for its tranquil beauty. Particularly striking is that Garbo had secured the burial plot decades earlier in the 1950s, well before her passing, a decision that was not merely practical but deeply symbolic, serving as a way to reconnect with her roots after years of self-imposed exile in New York City. Even in death, Garbo's life remains shrouded in mystery. Her final resting place is marked by a simple headstone bearing only her name, a stark contrast to the larger-than-life persona she portrayed on screen. For a woman who spent her life avoiding public scrutiny, her final resting place stands as a quiet, understated tribute to her enduring legacy as one of Hollywood's most elusive and fascinating stars. W.C. Fields, the iconic comedian renowned for his biting wit and aversion to traditional norms, left a final burial request that was as unconventional as the man himself. Fields, who died in the late 1940s, harbored a lifelong dislike for California despite spending a significant portion of his career in Hollywood. He famously quipped that he preferred his epitaph to read, "On the whole, I'd rather be in Philadelphia," a nod to both his hometown and his signature dry humor. True to his wishes, Fields was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California. However, his grave marker does not display the epitaph he so often joked about. Instead, his resting place is marked with a simple plaque, a surprisingly understated tribute for a man who lived life with such boldness. Even more intriguing is that Fields originally intended to be buried in Philadelphia, but his family ultimately decided against it, citing logistical challenges. This decision has fueled speculation over the years, with some suggesting that his burial in California was a final irony for a man who spent much of his life satirizing the state. In death, as in life, Fields managed to leave behind a legacy of humor, contradiction, and a hint of mystery, ensuring that his name remains as unforgettable as his one-liners. Mae West, the queen of double entendres and unabashed confidence, left a final burial request that perfectly mirrored her larger-than-life persona. West, who died in the late 1980s, was laid to rest at Cypress Hills Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York, the very city of her birth. Her final resting place is within the family mausoleum, a choice that underscores her deep attachment to her roots despite decades of Hollywood stardom. One of the most intriguing aspects of her burial is the inscription on her crypt, which reads, "Mae West, I'm no angel," a salute to one of her most celebrated films and a fitting epitaph for a woman who defied societal conventions at every turn. Adding to the allure, West was interred in a gown she had personally chosen years before her death, a glamorous ensemble that embodied her steadfast belief in always being ready for the spotlight, even in the afterlife. Mae West's burial was more than just a farewell, it was a final performance, a testament to her enduring wit, charm, and refusal to conform. For a woman who once declared, "You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough," her final resting place is a perfect reflection of a life lived entirely on her own terms. Theda Bara, one of the silent film era's most enigmatic stars, remained as mysterious in death as she was in life. Known as Hollywood's original vamp, she captivated audiences with her dark, alluring roles and an aura of mystique that the studios carefully engineered. Yet her final burial wishes marked a notable departure from the dramatic persona she displayed on screen. After her death in the mid-1950s, Bara requested to be cremated and her ashes scattered in the Pacific Ocean, a highly unconventional choice at a time when cremation was rare in mid-20th century America, especially for someone of her renown. Intriguingly, her ashes were not dispersed immediately. For several years, her remains were kept by her family, who grappled with both logistical and emotional challenges in carrying out her wishes. It wasn't until decades later that her ashes were finally released into the ocean, fulfilling her original request. Adding to the mystery, much of Bara's legacy has been lost over time. Most of her films vanished in a fire at Fox Studios in the 1930s, further intensifying the fascination with her life and death. Even in her final moments, Theda Bara remained a figure of intrigue, her burial wishes reflecting a deep yearning to return to the natural elements far removed from the artificial glamour of Hollywood. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment, and consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. Thanks for watching.